If you missed part 1 of the update 6.11 refines, we went over Cynthia, Python, Fallen Female Corn, and Petra. Check that out first, or you can go back after this video. Right now, in part 2, we'll be first talking about dual Halloween Hector and Lilina. Dual hero refines are happening, and also officially we can say all Hector ults gotta refine before base armads. I don't understand why they're afraid of quick repose too. In addition to our dual refines, we have legendary and mythic remixes for Eliwood and Yune. We'll cover their new skills with their refines. Let's start part 2. Dual Hector is a sword armor unit and a seasoned unit. He has pretty high attack, solid HP and defense, and some speed and res. Pretty typical Hector stat spread. Conjurer Curios got some updates. It's a 16-bite sword effective against fellow armor units and grants a flat +3 attack. If it is an odd turn or if the foe has less than 4 HP, grant +4 to all stats and reduces damage from the foe's first attack by X%. If the foe can make a follow-up attack, X is equal to 60%, otherwise it's 30%. So, Conjurer Curios keeps its old effect and adds damage reduction that gets stronger if Hector is being doubled. I'm very surprised that this weapon kept its rather inconsistent activation condition. If it's an even turn, Hector only gets his base effect if the enemy is hurt. Generally, that's not going to be the case, so you may want to lose out on half the weapon if Hector fights on the wrong turn. The intended way to solve this issue is with Hector's dual skill, which deals 20 damage to foes within 3 columns of him. Dual Hector is basically a mobile bolt tower, and the 20 damage is pretty hefty no matter who it is hit. Like Duma, ideally you hurt the enemy before you fight, and then Conjure Curios is just always active no matter what turn it is. Unfortunately, in Aether raids, enemies might just heal back up via the healing tower, or you don't even get to use the dual skill due to the dual's hindrance structure. In Summoner duels and other modes, you only have 3 columns to work with, and map layout can mess you up. To be fair, you can just bait enemies in on odd turns, but if you mess up, then Hector loses stats and his damage reduction. Moving on to the refine, this is much more consistent and reliable. If Hector is above 25% HP, he gets another +4 to all stats, inflicts attack and defense debuffs during combat equal to 10% of his attack stat at the start of combat, and restores 7 HP after every fight. The refine should activate almost every fight, and this gives Hector a decent amount of stats. It scales off his flat attack stat, and no merges, Hector already hits 60 attack with this weapon, which means you're going to get -6 attack and defense. With an attack super boon and investment, you can definitely hit 70 attack, and blessings could push that to 80. For the most part though, safe to assume at least -6 attack and defense debuffs. Now, personally speaking, since this is our first dual hero refine and Hector is a 5-star army unit, I was expecting something a bit crazier. Don't get me wrong, this is a pretty good weapon, but the activation condition of the first part is not a guarantee. If a fight starts on an even turn, no damage reduction may get Hector killed, so you gotta pay attention. This is especially true if you cannot use your dual skill. If Conjurer Curios is fully active though, you have a pretty interesting army unit. We all know save skills and hardy fighter work. They're busted, that's cool. I don't want to really focus on that for this Hector though. With +8 to all stats and at least -6 attack and defense debuffs, you essentially gain +14 to everything but speed. However, 8 speed is not unnoticeable since Hector doesn't fully dump speed to begin with. If you want a speed stack, this refine gives you that opportunity, and even if Hector is outsped, you have the 60% damage reduction. If you want to go for a classic setup, you could try the speedy special fighter build with distant counter. Hector may not be doubling himself, but with special fighter, the question is more about if you can KO Hector before he charges Ignis or Aether. If he is doubled, the foe has to chew through 60% DR and guard, on top of all the bonus stats. You throw in distant counter to mess with ranged foes, and preferably Hector has some kind of bonus mobility, armor march, boots, or some kind of warping. For those with fully maxed out investment, maybe a speedy Farzay build could work, or at least would be very annoying. Continuing our unusual playstyles, you could bring back Bold Fighter. With a extra speed and army effectiveness, Dual Hector can possibly take out other army units himself. Bold Fighter can cancel out follow-up denial effects, it grants bonus special charge, and Hector could use the dual skill for a free 20 damage as well. Add Assault Troop or Armor March to get around. An alternative to this is his innate Odd Follow-up B skill. It's basically an Omni Breaker skill for odd turns. That could work with Hector's higher speed, but only against other slower units. Last, for other skills, if you want, maybe you could go for a near safe build. We got the Free Starry Stance 3 and Slick Fighter from last month's Ephemera batch. If you go for far save, maybe use Distant Ferocity and all attack stacking. With the dual skills damage, you could just get some cheesy one-shot counters on anything not sturdy. If you do want to be more defensive or you want to have some insurance, Hardy Fighter can still work with Sacred Cow. You could also do Aegis if you want to charge it up on the foe's second hit. If you're afraid of brave attacks, deflect seals are available, and if needed we still have the old reliable quick riposte Sacred Seal. Overall, it kind of feels like the devs tried to balance this refine around using the dual skill. That's fair, but in Aether Raids this is obviously an issue. Worth mentioning that if you can get the 20 damage off, then everyone on your team benefits from that. This is a powerful effect, so I understand why they may have kept the wonky odd turn restriction in exchange. Don't get it wrong though, this is still a strong refine and Duo Hector is gonna get a lot of free stats from it. He has the healing if you plan to use save skills, and then there's some wiggle room for more fun offensive builds if you just have tons of investment on him already. Interesting refine for our first duo hero. Next up is Legendary Eliwood, a Sword Cavalier who also got his remix buffs. Let's start there. Vision of Arcadia 2 now states, at start of turn if a dragon or beast ally is deployed, grant +6 attack and speed and defense, no panic, and console 1 to Eliwood and ally with the highest attack stat for 1 turn. Oh boy, that's spicy. The theme for Eliwood's remix is that he will also be getting all the same support buffs he hands out to the highest attack ally on your team. Vision of Arcadia now grants speed buffs along with no panic to keep the buffs active, and Kanto 1. It's not near Trace, but Kanto 1 is still very useful. As someone who has used Harmonic Tana who also gives allies Kanto 1, I can attest that this is a very fun ability. Now, for Ardent Durandal, it also got some good buffs. It's a 16-might sword with +3 attack, and at start of turn, grant bonus doubler to Eliwood and ally with the highest attack. Additionally, Eliwood gets +4 all stats if above 25% HP. Just like his C-skill, Eliwood also now gets bonus doubler. Beforehand, Ardent Durandal literally did not give him anything but 19 might. All of his power went to supporting the highest attack ally. Now, Eliwood is gearing himself up to fight. For the actual refine, if unit initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, grant attack speed, defense, and res +4 to unit, neutralize the foe's field buffs, and deal true damage per hit equal to 15% of the foe's defense stat, including on AoE specials. No support power here, this is pure combat power for Eliwood. In total, Legendary Eliwood can give himself +8 to all stats, +6 attack, speed, and defense field buffs, which double up with bonus doubler. You have no panic, Kanto 1, you neutralize enemy field buffs, and a little bit of true damage. We went from a 19-might silver sword to a hell of a lot more combative power. Obviously, Eliwood's not going to be a one-man army, but he's in a way better position personally, and his support capabilities only got better. If you can, try to buff up his res stat, but even then with bonus doubler, that might not save that 16 base res. In terms of builds, you can either build Eliwood for more combat focus, or you can try to use some other support skills. As part of his remix buffs, Eliwood gets Flow Refresh 3 for free. That will give him offense and no follow-up when initiating, and you get 10 HP healing after combat. To be honest, I still think Flow Guard is better because healing after combat doesn't help if you trigger a special and you die in the counterattack. Regardless, even with Flow Refresh, you can at least double tanks now, just gotta be careful of specials. Since Vision of Arcadia grants Kanto and Ardent Durandal nullifies enemy buffs, you don't need low skills or near trace skills. That leaves any of the flow skills to use. For A skills, you can use Search Spell to heal back up, maybe try to get off a special with Heavy Blade. Not a guarantee, but at least it's an option now. Of course, Catch 4 or Clash 4 also work fine too, and Solos or Blade Session can go in the Sacred Seal slot. Like Python, you could maybe perhaps forgo some attack boosting skills to focus on speed and defense. We got the speed and defense Catch Seal coming on the way. You could also just do attack and defense stacking. Unfortunately, Resistance will still probably be in an awkward spot. I would just try to avoid dragons and mages if possible. Now, regarding Eliwood's support power, which was his original niche, obviously it's a lot better now. You still buff the highest attack ally, so you control who gets buffed when you're building your team. Most important thing to know is you need a dragon or beast ally for Vision of Arcadia. Maybe snag one of those Halloween dragons, Legendary Ninian, or buff up Fallen Corn from anywhere on the map. One fun thing to do at Eliwood is that you can give multiple allies the buffs if they tie for highest attack on your team. It may be worth trying to Fandango a setup where 2 or more allies all are being buffed by Eliwood. I would even go as far as using Sacred Seals with these smaller flat stat boosts just to match it up. You get a lot of perks now besides bonus doubler, and Eliwood could further support the team with things like Res Tactic, a Rally Ruse combo to provide debuffs and guard. You got the tier 3 dual chills, which are interesting as well, but you're going to sacrifice Eliwood's own combat prowess. Last thing to note, the bonus doubler status can stack with weapons and skills that give bonus doubler. For example, an infantry unit can run the bonus doubler Sacred Seal or the A skill. There are units with bonus doubler weapons like Legendary Marth. In theory, this can give you a ton of total stats if you're fully buffed up, but any lull type effect will completely cripple this setup. It's fun and you're immune to panic now, but it ain't foolproof. Personally, I think one bonus doubler effect is fine. Overall, Legend Eliwood got a great remix and refine. Not only did they buff his support power with neat things like Kanto, but Eliwood gives himself all the same power-ups. He's not a super crazy combative unit, but he at least has some bite now if you need him to fight. Last up for this month is Mythic Yune, who finally gets her turn. She is a dark mythic hero and a green flying mage who has largely been passed long ago by units like Atrium. Well, Yune's been biding her time and has one of the most fun and impressive refine / remixes so far. First up, let's talk about Chaos Named Plus, which has been completely reworked. At start of turn, if any foes have the highest attack, speed, defense, or res on the enemy team, inflict -7 on that stat to those foes and any foes within 2 spaces of them throughout their next actions. Additionally, on the main enemies with the high stat, you're also going to inflict panic on them. Chaos Named may have been changed, but it is still just as chaotic. Instead of a 3-column debuffing zone, Yune sort of has all 4 stat chill debuffs. Like the tier 3 dual chills though, they also have an area of effect. You can kind of think of it kind of like chill attack 4, chill speed 4, chill defense 4, and chill res 4. These hit from anywhere on the map and spread in an AoE, plus the main target's going to get panicked. It's possible for one unit to soak all 4 chills, but if they're too close to their team, then mass debuffs still going to occur. If the highest stats are spread out though, then depending on placement, multiple units may have different debuffs. One may have an attack buff only, one of them may have speed and res debuffs, one poor soul may get hit by all 4. Like the original effect, it's still absolutely chaotic. Moving on to the new Chaos Manifest weapon, this tome has 14 might, grants +3 res, and at start of combat, if the foe has more than 75% HP, or has an active penalty on them, Yune gets +6 attack, +5 res, she makes a follow-up attack, and if she initiates combat, she reduces damage for 1 hit by X%. X is equal to 2 times the total penalties on the foe within 2 spaces of the target, including the target, who has the highest total penalties. This is a massive buff, and it's a new mechanic for Fae. What is extremely funny is that Yune has taken the ally blade time effect from Ashura, but she's translated it into using debuffs from enemies around her target. This is such a smart effect because it counteracts one of the main hard counters to units like Yune. For example, if Brave Hector is far saving an ally, he neutralizes all penalties on him, which normally makes Yune look like a chump. However, Chaos Manifest looks at all of the nearby units around Hector for these debuffs. Hector may not be debuffed himself, but if the unit he's far saving is, then Yune takes those total penalties on them, she times it by 2, and that's how much damage reduction she gets. Let's say they have -7 attack and -7 speed thanks to Chaos Named. 14 total penalties times 2 equates to 28% damage reduction. That's not that crazy. But if the foe is fully hit by Chaos Named, you are looking at 28 total debuffs times 2 for 56% damage reduction. Keep this in mind, I'll come right back to it. For the refined portion, if Yune initiates combat or is within 2 spaces of an ally, she gets +5 attack and res, and deals true damage equal to the total penalties on the foe within 2 spaces of target, including the target who has the highest total penalties. This does not affect AoE specials. Okay, so exact same mechanic as the damage reduction portion, but this time this is how much dominance true damage Yune is getting. She can once again bypass debuff neutralization by targeting a nearby enemy instead. Like in our example, if the enemy has -4 debuffs to all 4 stats. This means Yune would deal 28 true damage and she has 56% damage reduction. You will want to notice this does not have a cap, and I'll showcase that with this clip.
It's your future.
Hate! Hate!
What you just saw was 100% damage reduction. It's real, but is it practical? Normally, Yune's gonna cap out at -7 to all stats for 56% damage reduction. This is where Panic comes into play. When buffs are panicked, they count as stat penalties, which means they are included when calculating dominance and for Yune her damage reduction. In that clip, Fallen Ike had -7 to all stats and debuffs. He then panicked field buffs on each stat as well. This total came out to exactly 50 total penalties. This means Yune got 50 dominance true damage and 100% damage reduction. Despite Fallen Ike having Unity to flip those debuffs around, he cannot lower Yune's true damage except with his own dodge damage reduction. And then his Mayhem Aether counterattack with 60 base damage does nothing because Yune has 100% DR. This setup is actually not impossible, but it requires full debuffing from Chaos Names and pretty much full panic buffs as well. You can get larger debuffs from things like Aether Right Structures, but it all depends. Something to keep in mind, Chaos Manifest has an HP condition, meaning if Yune's main target did neutralize their penalties, she still has the chance to leech the debuffs off a nearby foe. You really need to be careful. Back to the practicality of this setup, we've established that it does take a lot to amass all those debuffs. Let's say Yune only gets the 56% damage reduction. Well, that may be fine until fellow mages, but dragons and physical damage foes may still just destroy her because Yune has no defense, she has no hope from her weapon, and you can't get Mythic blessings and bonuses either. You also can just negate her damage reduction with things like Deadeye, and the damage reduction is only working when you initiate. Another problem for Yune is securing the kill herself. We saw that despite having 50 true damage, the enemy's damage reduction is a problem, and Yune can easily lose her follow-up to things like no follow-up or Wary Fighter. Her base speed is not super high, nor is it improved outside the speed debuffs, so there are other issues Yune has to worry about. It's a hilarious sight to see 100% damage reduction, but this is not like Brave Celeb's Miracle Effect, which is brain dead easy to activate. In terms of builds, Yune got Attack and Res Unity for free, which isn't bad to flip her own debuffs around, but it's not a must-use skill. You could pair it with warping effects like Aerobatics, Flower Formation, or Wings of Mercy. Speaking of B skills, we can just toss Sabotage Res aside, but there's just not a lot of other options. You could go Far Trace, damage reduction is going to be good. Maybe with Sturdy Impact, you could get extra insurance to not get doubled by tanks. If you can survive that, you can maybe reposition with Kanto. I'm going to once again mention the new Seal Res 4 B skill. It's a huge amount of extra res debuffs, and with Chaos Named, you can activate the guard part, which actually could be useful if Yune gets hit back. Hopefully she prevents a bonfire and the damage reduction can keep her alive. Other options you could use can be Desperation or Vanish. The Dominance True Damage part does work on either phase. Maybe that can save her. Desperation is going to be cheap, and it does work off the free follow-up attack. If you can double, then hopefully the instant double tap with all the bonus damage can get you a KO. If you need to deal with dragons or healers, Mystic Boost 4 can be used. Technically that does help with any engagement though, since you're going to have the attack debuffs and the healing. Overall, Mythic Yune got an absolutely cool refine and remix. It has some very high potential and a possible solution for one of the main weaknesses debuff focused units have, which is debuff neutralization. Sure, Yune will lose out on some stats, but the dominance true damage and the damage reduction effects can still kick in if nearby enemies are still debuffed. In general, Yune can be like Gunther as a key member for any debuff heavy team, and like versa, she combines debuffs with panic, so unprepared units can absolutely screw themselves over. She doesn't need to do any stat checks, but you also don't have full control for debuffs since they target the highest statted enemy. Basically, chaos goes both ways. Last thing I'll mention is that Duo Mikaya's dominant status does stack with Chaos Manifests. Pull out the Vanish strats for that one. If you want to be really nasty, put Yune with Harmonic Catria for triangle attack. A fully powered dominance double tap would be so gross. Alright, let's end it there. This is part 2 of the update 6.11 new refines. Go watch part 1 if you haven't, I'll have it linked. In general, this batch has some highs and lows, but the remixes for Eliwood and Yune are super impressive. I love what they did with Yune and her contrast with Ashura, and then the mirrored mechanics are so cool. Let me know your thoughts on these new refines. Up next, we'll be talking about the 3rd Ninja Banner. That should be out soon if you're going to be summoning. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.